with our workshop or first reading agenda. And we have one item on that agenda. For those of you following at home, this would be our first reading, item 9 on our agenda for the evening. This is our continued discussion of the future of a very important infrastructure project, village facilities. Just to give you an idea of how we're going to do this, in the past we've held these meetings sort of dinner table-like in the community room. Obviously there are a lot of people here tonight that were interested in this topic, which we're thrilled about because a big part of this is public understanding and engagement with respect to a project of this significance and magnitude. So we obviously kept it here. We just want to make sure that there was enough room for everybody and everyone was comfortable rather than being next door in a much smaller room. So hopefully this will work out fine. What I'm going to propose that we do is first hear from the Assistant Village Manager, Mike Baker, who's going to lay out where we're at and what the proposals are for consideration. Nothing will be decided definitively tonight. We're not voting on anything tonight. This is another step in a process that's been going on for some time in terms of providing direction to staff to come back with more details. One thing that I want to do, or we'd all like to do right after Mr. Baker is done speaking, is a number of the members of the Village Council have on prior occasions during this discussion asked for input specifically from the Economic Development Corporation of Downers Grove. And we do have a representative here tonight, Dr. Jankowski, who's here tonight, who's going to provide the view of the Economic Development Corporation. For those of you who don't know, the Economic Development Corporation a number of years ago was created as a separate entity from the Village of Downers Grove. We have a very strong relationship with the EDC, but it has its own governing board and its own employees. And its mission is the attraction and retention of quality businesses to our community for purposes of keeping our economy up to where it should be in an increasingly competitive environment. The chairman of the EDC, Mr. Scott Miller, is also here tonight. We'd like to hear their inputs. This is something the council asked for. And then we'll probably take some initial thoughts and questions from the council as long as Mr. Jankowski and Mr. Miller are here. And then we'll open up for public comments and questions. We may then come back to the council and go back to the audience. We're going to try to keep it loose and flowing, and so if you're not called upon right away, don't worry about it. There'll be other opportunities to weigh in. We really want this to be more of a conversation about a very important issue for our community. So first of all, thank you all for coming out. We're very glad that you're here. If we had enough seats at the table, we'd have you all sitting here, but unfortunately that's not possible. So without further ado, if we can ask Mr. Baker to begin with the introduction. Good evening.
I will. Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. I plan to provide some introductory comments and briefly describe the options that we've looked at related to this project. This is the very early stage, and that's why the information you're seeing and the tone of the presentation is very conceptual and very informal. It's intended to provide information that everybody can understand, to engage in some thoughtful discussion about the ideas. The information that I'm going to walk through that's up on the screen here that originated as a whiteboard write-up is actually also on a handout. Maybe if staff could distribute that. If anyone wants to take a look and you're having trouble seeing the screen, we can get you that information so you could have it right in front of your face. A little bit of history. This is a topic that the council has discussed on a number of occasions previously in public. If you've been following along closely, it was actually back in February and March of this year where the council had discussions and provided broad general direction to help guide the efforts of staff as we move forward on narrowing options related to facility planning. Technology. All right. So at that March meeting, you're going to hear me walk through 4 options. But the direction that we received at that March meeting from the majority of the council was to focus attention on the 2 options that involved new construction, really because of the complexity of those options. There was more to study, there was more analysis that needed to be done. But what you're going to see here is us bringing back and showing you all of the options, just again to demonstrate what has been considered as we've gone through this process. So I'm going to walk through the visual here from left to right, and I'm not going to go through the background information on the left side in much detail at all. We're trying to answer the key questions about what to build, where to build it, how to pay for it. Obviously, the timing now is important as we're moving into the budget process and want to make sure that the fiscal year 15 budget and future year projections reflect the plan and the direction based on, that we're given from council. Why we're even going through this exercise. As you can see here, the existing facilities that we have, primarily the police station, which is on this site, and Village Hall, are in need of substantial maintenance and improvement just to keep these buildings functional and operational for years to come. In addition, we have operational challenges in both of the buildings, and they don't quite fit the way we function as an organization at this time. So it's appropriate, we feel, to ask these questions about what our desired long-term plans and future should be with respect to our facilities. And based on the direction that was provided by council several months ago, the key concepts that you see listed here in the lower left-hand portion of the visual really has driven a lot of the thought process and the approach that we've taken, trying to maximize and look for ways that we can incorporate these key concepts in pursuing the options that we've laid out. A few more kind of overview comments regarding the options. Again, this is a diverse mix, each one with pros and cons associated with it. And what you'll see as you try to understand them are trade-offs involving cost, risk, and value. There's no real right or wrong answer, and it ultimately is a decision of what is best for the community. So now, again, I'm going to start moving into a very brief overview of the options, and if there's a need for any clarification after I get through, I'm happy to answer any questions. The first three options that you see here, actually the first two, really focus on what we can do with existing buildings. The first one, pretty straightforward, upgrading the systems that we have within these buildings. HVAC, roof, windows, all the major systems. When we conducted a facility condition assessment back in 2012, were determined to have exceeded their useful life. So the combined cost estimates from that study for the police station and Village Hall approached $10 million, and that's why you can see the figure represented here. So again, simply a $10 million figure approximately would involve replacement of the systems, no change to how we use these buildings from a functional standpoint. Option number two would go a step further and begin to address some of those operational challenges with either an addition or remodeling of one or both facilities, obviously remaining on the same site. The cost range, you can see, jumps more dramatically, $30 to $35 million, once you're talking about a remodel that would be necessary to meet the operational needs, primarily of the police department. Option number three, again, looks at the existing site and proposes construction of new facilities on this site. So the cost estimate range increases even a little bit more, because when you're talking about new facilities, based on our estimate, it's a higher price. And the resources that we have available, which are existing resources that we've identified in future years, do not require any adjustment to tax rates, remain approximately the same at between $13 to $14 million. Now, option four, I'm going to take a little more time in explaining this one, just because of the development complexity associated with this option. It involves new facilities and two sites within the village of Downers Grove. And as you can see, it's broken up into phases. The first phase would redevelop the property along Ogden Avenue at Lacey Road. It's approximately a 9.8 acre parcel that's owned by the Aldi Corporation right now. So that would involve acquisition of that property and then working with the developer. And the opportunity exists to develop commercial property directly along the Ogden Avenue corridor. It occupies about 3 acres of that site. And in the back portion of that property, there's enough room available to construct a municipal facility that has multiple uses. And that facility would include a police station. So the police station would relocate from its current site to Ogden Avenue. It includes a fleet maintenance facility, which is also on the back portion of the site that we're on right now. So that facility relocates to Ogden Avenue. And we also have the opportunity to relocate Fire Station Number 1, which we've looked at. It's in the Ellsworth Business Park, for those of you who aren't familiar. And there are operational advantages to relocating Station 1 because of how it better allows us to lower our overall response times for fire and emergency medical services, particularly to the northwest portion of the village. So that's the reason why the Station 1 relocation is included in that joint municipal facility on the Ogden Avenue site. What's also unique about this option, this phase of option 4, is that it allows us to tap into an additional source of revenue not available for the other options. And that includes resources that are available in the Ogden Avenue TIF that could be pledged for property acquisition and site improvements, so consistent with what TIF statutes allow. So that's why that revenue estimate rises a little bit. Once that phase is completed, obviously we've moved 2 substantial facilities off of this existing downtown site, and the opportunity then exists for the construction of a new village hall on this site, along with a residential or mixed-use development on the majority of the site that's left over because so much of the previous municipal facilities have moved off, and the village hall only needs a small portion of the overall site, which really extends all the way to the Washington Street crossing back to on the west to where the fleet maintenance facility is now. That's the property owned by the village, measures approximately 8 acres in total land area. That phase of the project has a unique revenue source tied to it as well, in that we could capture the value of this property, the land sale associated with the private redevelopment of the residential or mixed-use project, and property taxes associated with that development could be directed to help fund the village hall construction portion of the project. And that's what you see on the phase 2 revenue estimate of approximately $10 to $12 million. So again, I wanted to take a little bit more time just to walk through that one in some greater detail. Again, a lot of this information, if you haven't seen it already, is available on our website. We've tried over the last several weeks to make this information available to the public, to engage people, encourage comments, questions. You can email any comments or questions to dgfacilities@downers.us, and we're happy to respond to those and make them available to the council as this decision and this process proceeds. If that concludes my presentation, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, just at this point, thank you, Mr. Baker. I'll just ask if any members of the council have any questions for Mr. Baker about what the options are. And then we'll invite representative of the EDC to give some input in terms of the land use aspects.
Mike, I have a quick question about option 1. Is the building envelope, like the tuck pointing, exterior facade, part of that $10 million, as well as the parking lots and other kind of exterior improvements part of that figure? Or are we just talking about roofs, windows, HVAC, the items that you described in your presentation?
All aspects of the building structure were analyzed as part of that facility condition assessment.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Just following up on option 1, simply putting a new HVAC system in, a new roof, things like that, doesn't solve any of the operational challenges the police department faces, right?
That's correct.
Could you walk us through a couple of those challenges, give us some examples?
As some of the biggest challenges that the police department has with their facility involve things like evidence storage, which right now is spread across multiple evidence storage rooms within that building and even outside that building. Now, obviously, there's still complying with all aspects of state law and how evidence is processed, but you can imagine it becomes incredibly inefficient when you have evidence across multiple storage rooms. So that's one aspect. Meeting room privacy, I think they would tell you, is another challenge that they have that is an operational need that could not easily be addressed just simply by upgrading and improving the existing systems within that building.
By meeting room privacy, you're talking about things like interviewing victims, interviewing witnesses, things like that.
That's correct.
There's booking room issues, there's, privacy issues when you have basically someone who's under arrest. There's a lot of personal information that gets in that booking room. And I think later on tonight, an operational deficiency is going to be when the roof starts to leak again. Mm-hmm. And there's folks in the detective area and other cubicles and offices that are going to have to get out the buckets and hopefully the tarp holes. I mean, that's not just the police department efficiency, that's our public services, our public works, and our maintenance folks have to then activate and go in there, and that's a big ding on the efficiency of that building. And, it just proves that building, we have been kind of putting off the roof because of this discussion, but it's been leaking for many, many years. And it's just like your roof at home. You either fix it or you move, or not. I mean, you tear down your house, build a new one. There's a lot of options you can do at home, but I think that the efficiency of the police department was captured, I think, by Mike's comment right up here. The police department is too small. And that's a hard thing for some people to understand, because maybe most of us in this room have never even stepped foot in the police department, but if it's ever needed, if you're ever a victim of a crime and you need to have a private place to go explain to the police officers what happened, it's a hard thing to do in that building because of its size and space, and it's just a tough building in today's world of police service and public service.
Any other questions of the council, Mr. Baker? All right, thank you for the presentation. Then at this point, I'd like to invite Dr. Jankowski from the Economic Development Corporation. Good evening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Maybe you can take a moment to explain what it was that you undertook to do and set the table for what it is you're about to share with us.
Okay, first, by way of introduction, Michael Casa wanted to be here tonight and he regrets not being here. I spoke with him today. He's in Michigan with his father, who had surgery, very successful surgery. So keep them in your thoughts and prayers. They're doing well. His father is in some discomfort, but he's doing well.
For those who may not know, Michael Cass is the executive director of the Economic Development Corporation, and you're a board member.
Right. I am on the executive board. I'm a past president of that board, and we have our current president, Scott Miller, here with us today. You asked what the purpose of what we were doing was and what the question was that we were asked. We were asked to comment on the economic development impacts of the proposed land uses of the plan. The focus of what we have looked at is only the impact of these specific proposed uses for the downtown civic center and the Ogden and Lacey properties. So we're looking at option 4 that you've been discussing here tonight, and the land uses involved there.
Right, and just for clarification, that's the only one that really involves different land uses.
Right.
That's the reason why that was the one you looked at.
Right. So, we have two basic parcels that we're looking at here. We're looking at the existing village facilities where we're sitting today and the Ogden at Lacey property. The village currently uses this 9-acre parcel for municipal facilities, and the central issue for us was whether an alternative use for most of the property would unlock economic value for the community. We considered the economic development implications of a multifamily use for most of the site, as was presented by Mr. Baker. And this is what we found. First of all, we believe that upscale, transit-oriented multifamily development is the highest and best use for this property. Residential developers in Chicago are seeking larger downtown multifamily sites that are within close proximity to metro stations. This would be a very hot property for those types of developers. A large multifamily project would increase the population of the downtown and would increase the customer base for downtown restaurants, retailers, and other businesses. Many of these tenants are attracted to the walkability of downtowns, and they would generally increase foot traffic in the downtown and would enhance the downtown economy, and that would generate more sales tax revenue. That's just straightforward economic activity. Private development of the Civic Center site creates a property tax generating use. Right now, there's no property tax coming out of this site. The Main Street Metro Station becomes much more of an economic development asset, serving not just commuters, which is pretty much what we do right now, but it would serve new residents that were drawn to this downtown because of the multifamily housing that is in close proximity to the station. Millennials and other young professionals generally, a large transit-oriented multifamily project will attract millennials and other young professionals that are in demand by corporate headquarters and other technology-driven businesses. The attraction of millennials and other young professionals represents the future workforce for corporate headquarters in Downers Grove, and we have quite a few of those. If we want to keep those, we have to have an appropriate workforce here. These types of developments would attract those types of people. Redevelopment of the Civic Center property increases opportunities for redevelopment of older adjacent properties. So if you look along Washington, we have some kind of tired properties there. They're not going to get redeveloped unless there's something there's a catalyst to create that redevelopment. Redevelopment of the Civic Center property creates a stronger link between the downtown and the Maple Fairview corridor. So the downtown would start to reach toward the east, toward the Maple Fairview corridor, which we've identified as a key place for economic development in the village. And finally, redevelopment of the Civic Center property, as well as any adjacent parcels, will enhance the overall appearance of the downtown. A ball bearing factory on the east end of the downtown is not an asset.
Just for clarification, you're talking about what this building used to be before.
I'm sorry, yes, this was a ball bearing factory. All right, so I'm going to shift to our assessment now in the parcel on the south side of Ogden at Lacey. That parcel has been vacant for decades, in spite of numerous attempts to find a suitable development project. Actually, when we interviewed Michael Casa for this job, that was his case study to tell us what he would do with that property and to have him tell us what he would do that nobody else could do before him for decades and decades. While it would be preferable to attract a large retailer to anchor the commercial center, a commercial center on that site, this does not appear to be likely to us. The central issue is whether a non-commercial use located in the rear of the property would unlock economic value for the community. We considered the economic development implications of this proposed land use, village facilities in the rear of the property, and commercial outlots in the front of the property. And these are our findings. First of all, the proposed plan would result in the property being developed. The alternative could very well be that the property would remain vacant for the foreseeable future. The market has said to us for a long time that as a vacant parcel is its highest value use right now, just a vacant property. New commercial outlots could be created along Ogden Avenue. These outlots could be developed for single-use tenants such as restaurants, multi-tenant buildings, a large tenant that would use the entire commercial property, such as an auto dealership. There are no 3+ acre sites available on Ogden Avenue right now for an auto dealership, so that is a possibility if we split the front section off. It doesn't have to be 3 tenants, it could be 1 tenant, and that could be an auto dealership. We also note that auto dealerships have shrunk. There aren't as many auto dealerships as there were before the 2008 recession, and they're probably not likely to expand anytime soon. The approval and installation of a traffic signal would enhance Ogden and Lacey as a commercial intersection. That's one of the things we've heard. We get a signalized intersection at the site. That always spurs economic development. It's worked at Saratoga. We're seeing development activity there now. and it would work on that part of Ogden Avenue. The development of vacant property on the south side of Ogden at Lacey may create redevelopment opportunities for adjacent parcels, particularly those on the north side of Ogden, and as a result again of the signalized intersection. We think that the development of commercial outlets for restaurants and other tenants can generate sales tax revenue again, which is important to the village. And finally, the proposed plan would become a significant development project for the stretch of Ogden Avenue between Middaugh and Pershing. There is a huge section on that part of Ogden Avenue, which is a virtual desert right now for economic development. This would be developed and it would create an anchor. It's not quite putting the Sears Tower on the west side of the downtown of Chicago, but it's the same concept. If you put something there that is a catalyst, you can have other sites fill in, and then you add the signalized intersection and you create even more value. Finally, one more point. The development of the vacant property, as well as any future redevelopment of adjacent parcels, will enhance the overall appearance of the corridor. One of the things we hear a lot from people who are looking on that part of Ogden Avenue is they hate what their neighbors look like there. So if you put one good neighbor in there, you get more good neighbors. Okay, so just to conclude here, based on our review of economic development impacts of the proposed land uses for the downtown civic center parcel and vacant property on the south side of Ogden Avenue at Lacey, we conclude that redevelopment of most of the downtown civic center parcel for a transit-oriented multifamily project represents the very highest and best use of this property. A large upscale transit-oriented multifamily project would have a positive economic development impact on downtown Downers Grove. Spoken with Linda Kunze, she loves it. To facilitate the redevelopment of the downtown civic center property, some municipal facilities would have to be relocated. So we can't leave things here that are currently here. We have to move them if we want to unlock the value in this property. While the development of Ogden Lacey as a retail center with an anchor store is preferable, it's not likely to happen. A development project with a non-commercial use in the rear of the property, village facilities, and commercial outlots along the front of the property at a signalized intersection, we believe is the next best alternative. And we think it's a better alternative than a vacant lot. Finally, we think these proposed land uses for the downtown civic center and the Ogden Lacey property will have a positive economic development impact on the surrounding areas and the community as a whole. We actually do believe that they will have catalytic impacts on the surrounding properties. That was in the comprehensive plan, certainly for the Ogden Lacey property. This property was never in consideration in the comprehensive plan, but this would be catalytic for the downtown. We think this is a very key part of the future of our downtown. That's all I have.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. Appreciate you and Mr. Miller coming down here today from EDC. It's helpful input, and I know a number of different commissioners over the course of these discussions have specifically asked to get the opinions of the EDC, like we do on many redevelopment opportunities before we make any decisions. I think it's an important asset to have as a source of input and consideration. And as you know, we don't always agree with what boards recommend to us or even the EDC, but it's I think it'd be irresponsible not to have at least your thoughts on it. So thank you for sharing that. At this point, I'll just ask if any members of the council have any questions or comments of Dr. Jankowski. And I keep calling Dr. Jankowski.
I was going to say Scott could.
It's the PhD type, right?
Yeah, well, it's because of my new retirement role as an adjunct professor, right?
Thank you. Questions of Don? Or sure. Anything you want to add?
Scott is a pretty good real estate guru, if you have questions of him.
We have both Don and Scott available for any other questions. The memo was very thorough, so I appreciate that, and you went through it in great detail. So thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
All right, well, we know you're not going anywhere, in case members of the audience have any questions when we get there, so we appreciate it. Why don't I then open it up for other thoughts, comments from members of the council on the 4 different options that we've been looking at for some time now, several months, maybe longer. Commissioner?
It's no surprise. I'm, sticking with option 4. We've had this discussion a few times now, and each time we meet, we get a little bit more meat on the bone, and we learn a lot more about the viability of both phases of option 4. Dr. Jankowski's and the EDC's viewpoint and perspective of these projects is very interesting to me, and I think that, that Lacey and Ogden parcel has been kind of a wounded soldier out there for us, and we are able to use our talents here and our professionalism at Village Hall to come up with a creative option to basically develop that site. We spoke a little bit about the police department and its inefficient areas and its condition right now. Commissioner Barnett and I were talking earlier today, and I wasn't going to say this, but it'd be interesting if we all came back here later tonight and saw what that building really is like at midnight when the storms come through, or if there's 3 or 4 people that get arrested, or if there's some sort of large issue in town where there's people that need to be in the lobby in a private setting. It just doesn't work. It hasn't worked for a number of years. This council has an opportunity with the timing, with our planning, with our long-range planning, with our financial planning, with all the things we have done leading up to this moment tonight and beyond, to not only fix that, but to help economically spur development both in the downtown and on Ogden Avenue. Those are 2 priorities that we have consistently said are important to not only this council, but previous councils as well. The building we're in now, Mike says police department is too small and Village Hall is too big. How much more responsible is it to say that we need to downsize this building? We have had multiple facility studies. There was one in 2007 when we had almost, 50 or so more staff members just in this building. That's been reduced over the years by many FTEs. We're at a position now where this organization is running very lean, has the right amount of people working here at Village Hall, and to build the right-sized building that is, 21st century building that has the capabilities for mobile workforce, for combined space, shared use, shared everything, mobile workstations, everything we talk about. We kid about, Google and how they use their workspaces at the Google headquarters. Cubicles become little meeting rooms, and they have low file cabinets with, pads on them. It sounds corny, but those are the kind of workspaces that are in today's workplace and make a difference when employees are meeting and brainstorming to come up with great ideas like this facility planning opportunity. Moving the Fleet Fire Station Police Department to Ogden Avenue allows us to bring together a lot of the municipal services that are very important to us. It also allows us to have space potentially for other partnerships with other municipalities, and I think that's something that's very important to me, and I'm glad to see is still part of the key concepts on our facility planning list. As I said, it's no shock to my colleagues. I've been pretty close to option 4. At the beginning, it seemed a little bit more risky, but as we've gone through and had more conversations and more information, more data, it's becoming a little bit more, not a little bit more, it's becoming a lot more easy to say yes to option 4 for me. I'm excited by it. I trust our staff to be able to find the financial options that are right for the project, whether it's use of TIF dollars or other revenues. To see the drug seizure line up there is great. I hope that number actually grows up. Our connection to not only DUMEG, but the DEA and our outstanding officers that participate in those 2 organizations have been not quite record-breaking like some other communities, but they're on their way, and we have some great guys working in those 2 areas. So hopefully that number will go up and it brings some of those other numbers down as well as the gap. So I think it's the right thing to do. I'm prepared to go into the budget season with starting to get some real dollars on the table to make these decisions and see the impacts of how the future plays out with our budgeting here in the village. This is a big deal. There's no doubt about it. I'm glad that so many folks joined us tonight. It's great to have eyes and ears and those watching at home as well. We did get a couple of emails from the facilities email list, which is a nice new feature that we have. And it's great to hear from residents and their thoughts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks. Sean?
Yeah, I just, I've been a long supporter of number 4. I think that's the wise decision. It would be great if we could do option 1, but we know it's not a realistic option for us. Because once all is said and done with rehabbing what we have equipment-wise, roofs, so on and so forth, at the end of the day, it still doesn't solve the whole reason we're here talking about the need for new facilities. All it does is, in my opinion, is just extend the use, the life of an existing structure. And I think this is the time, if we're gonna do this, the dollars are cheap. We know where the interest rates are. They're at record low still. So I think, with our ratings and what staff has shared with us on areas that we can fund this, I think it's well worth pursuing and still continuing down the option 4. Not really sure of the makeup of the question or the amount of dialogue you want from each one of us, Mayor. But, I still have some concerns regarding our involvement with fleet maintenance. Is this stuff you want to hear from us now? Or do you want to just particularly stay with the option that we're interested in?
Yeah, I think the purpose of tonight, and correct me quickly if I'm wrong, is that if we really owe at this point in the game to provide some direction to staff in terms of where effort should be expended to come back with more granular details, and I suspect that some of the operational stuff would fall in that category. So I sort of see this whole process as an international flight. At one point in time, we were flying over the ocean at 48,000 feet, and now we're getting closer to land. We're starting to come down, and things are becoming more and more in focus. And you can still decide where you want to land in that plane, but you get a better look at the topography and what the weather conditions are before you actually put down the landing gear. My guess is that that is an operational issue that we might want to address as we get a little closer to the airport.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. The only question I do have, and Commissioner Newstead brought it up about the partnering. We all read in the local papers, I believe the Tribune ran an article about District 58 looking for, their use of their facilities and, where we stand staff-wise with going with a partnership, if you want to call it that, with District 58.
I'd like to piggyback on that. That's one piece of this puzzle, the option 4 puzzle, that is very important to me, and I know it has been to other folks here as well. I hope that we're still actively pursuing that. I know staff is, and perhaps it will take a little more activity on our part to get that option really rolling, and I'm perfectly fine taking that.
Well, if one other person says that we want to ask staff to pursue that partnership opportunity, then it'll be pursued.
With 58 in light of the newspaper articles.
Well, sure, that's, I think, the obvious one, for the
Okay.
reason you mentioned.
Well, I think there's many others. that we
There are
need.
other opportunities.
Township,
Sure,
high
sure,
school,
sure.
grade
And
school.
We talk about cooperation, collaboration, and consolidation. This is a prime opportunity to be irresponsible not to study it. And District 58 is the easy one because they clearly are in the process of discussing what to do with their own facilities. And if there could be a partnership between the village and 58 to the benefit of shared constituents, well, that's just common sense. Why wouldn't you do that? It's the same reason we did things like combine the 911 call center with Westmont and save both villages 6 figures every year. That's what creative, innovative leaders and staff do. So I think we have to explore those partnerships. And 58 is the obvious one, but obviously I don't think we're limiting it to that. If others present themselves where instead of 4 or 5 different entities all going their own way and trying to solve issues at necessarily a higher cost, through partnerships and collaboration and cooperation, you can solve many problems with one fell swoop. That's necessarily going to be much more efficient and beneficial to all the shared taxpayers. But that's just a partnership. I think that would be something that we would do no matter what. Even if we were doing something here on site, we would still, and even in this building, we've entertained that partnership. So I think that's a constant goal of the village, is to identify and pursue those kinds of partnerships wherever it makes sense. I think it's been noted by more than one person, and previously to tonight, we know that there are other taxing bodies in town that are trying to resolve their own facilities issues, so why wouldn't we work together if we can, if it makes sense?
Do we have an update on, obviously we've been discussing this sort of thing for a while. Is there anything that we could bring out on our end?
Yeah, I'm going to take a wild guess and suggest that depending on where we kind of end up here tonight, if those next steps are taken to sort of get the plane down another 10,000 feet to see more detail, then it might be a good direction to make a radio call to District 58 and see whether or not there are some shared possibilities with more detail in terms of what that might be. That'd be my guess.
Greg's, following up on Greg's point a little bit, we probably need a little update, but it probably involves.
Here, you gotta talk louder.
Sorry, we probably do need a little bit of an update, and it involves likely some involvement, more involvement on our behalf as well.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was
And-
angling at.
And it's been, to this point, a little bit of a chicken and an egg conversation, right? Because we,
Chickens. Hey, here we go again.
here we go again. Bad analogy. But if we start to take many more steps forward, we'll have some things to actually talk about.
Yes,
And
agreed.
that's a pretty big issue. I think it helps not only us, but staff too. Any dialogues about what might partnerships look like, to this point, would be pretty hard to have in sort of the
Abstract.
amorphic form of
Right.
this conversation. So, I guess I would chime in with the whole concept of, I think that at this stage of the game, to use your flight analogy, we still ought to be pointing ourselves towards 4. That clearly can change. But I think saying so in a little more definitive fashion allows way more development of the details that will cause us to either think we should or shouldn't continue that path, including partnership opportunities.
Exactly. Right, exactly.
One thing I guess I'd like to add is, as we go forward, I know you mentioned it relative to Sean, but let's start to hear and start to, at the very least, put down on paper, if not totally quantify, some of the things we think we might experience operationally that would prove beneficial to us. We heard about response times, but there are response times that are also maintenance, travel times and transit times. There's also PD, handling. There's going to be, ideally with any of these scenarios, there would be substantial improvement in operations that would cause reduced operational costs. There are also the ongoing maintenance. We're talking primarily in this slide about capital investment, whether it be here in these facilities or in some new ones, but we need to have some idea of what those ongoing operational and maintenance costs for this facility look like and what they might look like with a new facility. That's part of the equation also. So I'd like us to move in the forward direction and start to give ourselves some more details about what that might look like. Even if it's not at that point facility design specific, you're going to know some of those things right now. I suspect we could go through top to bottom in our staff and identify the things that are in people's way that would be targets we're trying to remove under whatever set of circumstances we do. And understanding what those mean would be something I'd like us to get a better handle on.
Becky?
I think, we're all weighing in on the options that are interesting to us, but, the question that I was thinking about tonight was, should we invest significant taxpayer dollars in 2 buildings that we know aren't meeting the village's needs? Village Hall is too big, it's inefficient, it's located on 9 acres of prime real estate, downtown Downers Grove. The police station's too small and inefficient. You think about if your car is failing, it has 150,000 miles, are you gonna put a new engine in it, or are you gonna consider buying a new car? So I think it's important, and we owe it to the taxpayers to really evaluate this option and all of the options ahead of us. But what's the most responsible use of tax dollars? So option 1, investing in failing buildings, I think that's a gamble. My husband's grandfather calls gambling, put a hole in the wall and just put money in it. That's kind of what we would be doing. We'd be investing in these buildings.
What house does he live in?
Yeah, go open up this driveway. Option 2, doing a remodel or an addition, it's still going to cost a significant amount of money. Option 3, keeping Village Hall and the police station here, that's the most expensive option. And option 4, we're having more efficient facilities, We're cleaning up the Ogden and Lacey site, which has been, that's one of the things I hear from a lot of people in town. What's going on with that site? How come no one's buying it? Well, it's a challenging site that, we're having trouble developing.
Contaminated.
Yeah. We're going to have improved response time, adding commercial development opportunities at Ogden and Lacey. It's the most affordable between option 3 and 4. I'm repeating some of the things that people have said, but I just want to make sure that my thoughts are on the record. A multifamily development at Village Hall site would increase the population in downtown, increase the customer base, added sales tax revenue, all the things that Mr. Jankowski so eloquently shared. So there's just so many opportunities for option 4 that it seems really foolish to not explore it. So that's where my opinion lies. Option 4. Thank you.
Mayor, can I jump in?
All yours, David.
Thanks. I hate to be the throw a blanket on something of that nature, but I'm going to disagree with some of my colleagues who've spoken previously. I personally believe that option 4 is not the best option. I'm much more inclined to move towards option 1 or possibly a blend between options 1 and 2. I think that, to me, the idea that we need a new village hall, a new police station, is something that I know in many conversations with neighbors and friends around town that is something that I haven't found a lot of support for. And I find that people are interested and certainly want the village to continue to provide excellent services to our residents. And discussing the condition of the facilities, certainly there are upgrades in systems that need to be undertaken. HVAC, roof, windows, and such, the building envelope as Mike presented to us. I appreciate all the work that staff has done on exploring all these options, especially option 4 and how complex that is, and I appreciate the work of the EDC in exploring option 4 and those proposed land uses. And while I agree that I think there are benefits if you were to sell the Village Hall land and construct multifamily, I think there are other opportunities for multifamily development in downtown, as we saw when the redevelopment of the Prospect and Rogers site near downtown. A $14 to $22 million gap between the funding available and the cost of this project is something that scares me. It scares me as a representative of the residents in this community. It scares me as a taxpayer. I personally believe that if we're going to go out and bond for that type of money and thus we'd have to raise taxes or do something to generate revenue to cover those bond payments. I think if that type of revenue were generated, I personally think that we should invest more in services that are directly provided to the community rather than these facilities. I think that this comes as no surprise to many of my colleagues. I've been a supporter of option 1 since I first discussed this. I'm very, I appear to be in the minority on this, but I personally, and as a representative of the people of this community, I just don't see option 4 or option 3 as options that are particularly responsible for the taxpayer. Commissioner Rankin posed a good question of, should we invest taxpayer dollars in buildings which are outdated or have ended, are not fit for purpose in the current environment? I think that's a good question. But to me, that question really gets to the point that fit for purpose in any environment constantly changes, and the way people work is constantly evolving. I support using this existing building, making some renovations such to facilitate those changing work habits, changing ways people work. And we'll continue to support that going forward. In 15 years, maybe something completely different, new technologies. As we saw, we went from desktop computers to laptops, and now almost everyone has tablets. So there's a lot of evolution, and I think that we can continue that evolution in these existing facilities. I would look forward to improving these facilities, and I think I personally view that as the most responsible course of action for not only the taxpayers, our staff, and who are extremely valuable to us. And I think that no matter where you are on this option, I think we all agree that the services that are being provided out of the Village Hall and the police station are extremely important to our residents. And I hope that we'll continue to be able to provide such excellent service to the residents, regardless of what option we go forward with. And I think that we can, in the current facilities, continue to provide excellent services. So that's where I'm at, Mayor. Council, thanks.
Thanks. Can you put the slide back up of, you had up there, Mike, go ahead, Greg. Sorry, you didn't really get to say anything last time, did you?
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You said a lot, he supported 4.
Yeah, I do in fact support 4.
And partnership.
And partnerships. Good. I want to seize on something that Commissioner Olson said, though. I think the term evolution is important. I don't think if we were setting up the Village of Downers Grove from scratch today that we would want a 9.8 acre vacancy on Ogden Avenue. We've tried in bad economic times, we've tried in good economic times to develop that parcel, and it just hasn't happened. We're presented with an opportunity here to not only put village facilities onto that property, but to also get commercial development on that property that is unwilling to go there now. I think that's very important. We also probably wouldn't have fleet services right here in the middle of downtown. We may not have the police department right here in the middle of downtown. I think it's important to consider the other things that can take place with those properties. And if the highest and best use is to put multifamily here that will generate additional property tax revenue, sales tax revenue, these dollars will go into our local economy, will help fuel the local economy, and I think it's important that we look at those steps and take those steps. And in the middle of doing that, we're also, as Commissioner Newstead alluded to earlier, right-sizing the village's footprint. There's no reason why we should have an oversized village hall that is inefficiently laid out and doesn't allow staff to do what they need to do in the most efficient way possible. Or a police department that's too small that we could then combine with the fire department. It's saving space and putting property back on the tax rolls to the benefit of the entire community. To not move forward with option 4, I think it would be irresponsible. I think it's the right way to continue looking at. Obviously, there are a lot of moving parts. And to go back to my initial point earlier, the opportunities for partnerships. If District 58 is looking at facilities at the very same time, which obviously they are, it's important that we reach out to them. And that's not to exclude the other school districts, the township, et cetera. If we're going to be serious about the consolidation of not only government buildings, but government itself, I think we have a responsibility to start here at home, and this is one good way to do it. So I'm enthusiastically in support of option 4. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to say, I think it's premature to start talking about what the most responsible, or least responsible decision is. We're still flying over the coastline here at 35,000 feet. I don't think we can start to gauge what's responsible and what's irresponsible in the best interest of taxpayers or the least interest of the taxpayers. I think we're not there yet. What would be irresponsible is not to explore every option in front of us, even if those are some pretty difficult things to analyze and with a lot of moving parts. Innovation, creativity, all these things that we talk about all the time, we're presented with an opportunity to really explore one and see what would be most responsible. So that's what I'm interested in. It would be very easy to call this whole project a new village hall, but to do that, that would be an irresponsible label. This is very little to do with Village Hall, and much, much more to do with a series of opportunities to solve a number of nagging problems that have challenged this community for decades, and then also to gain some advantages through some creative synergies, innovations, and hopefully partnerships, and to not study those carefully with the full awareness and input of the community, that to me would be irresponsible to the taxpayers. You're absolutely right. I don't think there's a person in this room that would say that if we were building a brand new community out of a cornfield with a railroad track running through it, that you would put 9 acres of fleet maintenance, village hall, ball bearing factory, and a police station right smack dab in the middle of your most desirable area. Nobody would do that. So if an opportunity presents itself to change that, you got to let it out, explore it. Now, whether it ultimately is the best decision or not, that remains to be seen. But we're really talking tonight about whether to further explore that option. Sure, the easy thing to say would be, well, let's just write a check for $10 million and put a Band-Aid on this building and call it a day. We'd all groan and moan about the $10 million, but that would be it. There wouldn't be a whole lot to engage folks on. There wouldn't be a whole lot to analyze. Wouldn't have to work very hard for that. That's an easier choice, no question about it. One thing I don't think I've heard anyone say is do nothing. So there is no option 5, which is do nothing. Something has to happen. So now you start looking at numbers. And where I get really interested in is I'm looking at option 1, and it's $10 million. Okay, what do I get for my $10 million? I think that's what any smart consumer asks. I'm going to go and write a check. I want to know what I get for it. And then I look at option 2 and option 3, and it starts to get really pricey. And I agree that makes me a little nervous. We're all taxpayers in this room. We all represent all the people in Downers Grove, all 7 of us. That's all important to each and every one of us. And I look at option 4, and sure, there's a lot more ink up there and it's more complicated, but we're talking about a gap right now, and again, we're still at 35,000 feet. So this is a very conservative estimate of between 14 and $18 million. And I'm just wondering, gee, well, what if that $10 million over on 1 is closer to 12, and what if that 14 is closer to 13? You really got to look at both of them very carefully, because if you're going to spend that kind of money, you want to make sure you get the most out of it. I know what I'm going to get with $10 million. You're sitting in it. And you know, the parcel remains what it is. The opportunities Ogden and Lee remain what they are. It's pretty status quo. The opportunities for partnerships don't go away. There's still opportunities for partnerships, but not in the same way, I think. So the question is, do you put down 10, 12, $14 million, and we haven't even gotten to the issue of how to pay for it. So I also don't think we ought to be talking about raising taxes or anything like that yet. We're not even at that point yet. Clearly, we're trying to figure out how to ways to do this with existing revenue translation, no new taxes. Obviously, everybody's very sensitive to that. And the more, unfortunately, in order to get some more creative financing, you have to get some more creative proposals, and this is why I think we're taking the time to look at some of these things. But if you can put a number not too far off from $10 million that you're going to have to spend anyway, figure out how to do that with little or no new revenues. And you don't just get a smaller, smarter, modern facility that better serves the community in terms of the village hall, but you really solve your nagging problem of a police station. You get a modern and right-sized police station, a modern and right-sized fleet services building, a modern and right-sized fire station, both of which contribute to increased service due to response times, better use of assets, better service, a net, with the net cost of all this, ultimately, doesn't turn out to be a whole lot different than the 10 million, and we don't know yet. I think that's something you're really going to look at. The partnership opportunities are huge, as we already mentioned. I won't belabor that, but to the extent that we can put a fallow property over in Ogden Lee to a use that doesn't just solve one problem, but gets it cleaned up, has environmental contamination, that's no secret, but then allows for economic catalyst opportunities, not just to that parcel in front, but around it. The traffic light, which is something that would be beneficial. and then to put this 9-acre parcel that we're sitting on right now to its highest and best use, and I think few would disagree with that. That could be a benefit not just to the village, but to the downtown. The workforce housing issue is a big one. We've been hearing about that in the manufacturing industry. We've heard about that from corporate headquarters that we try to locate here to Downers Grove. And Commissioner Durkin's right. The financial climate is another reason why we got to really look at this very seriously right now. The financial climate for the cost of money is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And my fear is that if we go back 10 years and Commissioner Barnett will start to twist in his seat, if you look at this as though maybe streets were looked at 10 years ago, and you don't make the investment because it's just easier not to, you pay the price down the road. And I think we really have to be more open-minded and not sacrifice long-term needs and long-term benefits for short-term gains of one type or another. I think this is not the time to be myopic, and this is the time to walk the walk and talk the talk when we talk about innovation, creativity, and exploring partnerships with other entities. We're not making any decisions here tonight, and obviously that's why we want to hear what people have to think. We're talking about giving direction to fly a little closer to the topography and start to see a little bit better what these opportunities on the option 4 side look like, because to not to, I think, would be irresponsible. We're not landing the plane tonight. You can always circle the airport and land somewhere else. But I think it would be irresponsible not to fully explore it, because for not a whole lot, potentially for not a whole lot more money, we could get a whole lot more benefit for the community and maybe even for other bodies in this town that we have shared constituencies with. And that's not just a pipe dream. I mean, again, I'll go back to the example of combining our 911 call center with Westmont. Both communities saved 6 figures every single year. I mean, to not think about things like that, and we're just kidding ourselves. But we'll see. So I'm in favor of continuing to explore this, because I think it's worth the investment of resources, and we owe it to the community to be creative, innovative, and do the hard thing, and make the tough analysis, and not just cast this off as, oh, it's a village hall project, and let's put a $10 million Band-Aid in the building and call it a day. That may ultimately be the best solution, Commissioner Olson, but I'm not convinced I know that I have enough information to make that call yet.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Commissioner Olson, so were you saying that you might support option 2? Did I misunderstand that? You were saying remodeling or...
My general sense is that I've supported option 1. I think if there are specific needs that are demonstrated, specific operational needs, I'm certainly open to consider that as we get closer, but philosophically, more generally, I'm with option 1. Stay within the existing building envelopes. If there's renovation that's needed, I think that's something we should consider as we would get closer to landing, such as the mayor's analogy is gone.
So Mike, can you answer option 2 when it talks about renovations, remodel? Would those be so that it solved all the operational deficiencies then? Or is that just a conceptual idea of what the cost might be?
Obviously, we haven't gone far enough to really have a good sense of what the scope of all that work is, because this is quite preliminary. But when that cost range of 30 to 35 million was established, it was with an anticipation of trying to substantially meet a lot of the operational needs with addition and or remodel.
So that's a significant investment, and we're not getting all the gains from option 4. Right. Right. Thank you.
And the gap's actually larger.
Yes.
Yeah, well, one of the things I fully expect us to explore is how to shrink those gaps. But our staff is smart enough to be very conservative in putting things up like this.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Mayor, on option number 4, you talk about the building a new fire station number 1, which means current station 1 and Ellsworth would go away. is there any chance that we can add to the finances here, this, what we think that property would be, what we would get? I mean, we show that we have drug seizure funds, Ogden TIF, existing revenues and financing.
We could estimate the value of that
Will
asset.
we put that in there?
Certainly.
I mean, it doesn't have to be today or tomorrow, but just
Yeah.
as we get into this, I mean, is that gonna be, maybe that's a place for your microbrewery that,
It's not my microphone.
not yours, but the ones that call you all the time, maybe because they have the big garage doors, I have no idea. There's gotta be a useful life for that in the resale.
All right, well, everyone's been very patient, so I'm going to ask the council to sort of take a break from questions and open it up to the audience. Since it's coming in at 9 o'clock, I appreciate its patience. But I thought it would be helpful to at least hear the presentation from staff, to hear the views of the EDC, since we specifically asked for those. And it was important to us, and at least hear what what we're all thinking now. This is an ongoing fluid conversation. If the plane analogy hasn't been beat to death already, we're still significantly high up and not anywhere near landing this plane yet, nor is the location of where it will land by any means determined. So this is a process that necessarily needs input and understanding of the community. We've been talking about it for some time, arguably goes back to before the recession, although that was a very different project back then. Sometimes recessions have ways of changing the way you think about things. But we'd like to hear what people think, and it's not just tonight. If you have a comment or question tonight, by all means, we're going to invite you right up here to sit at the dinner table with us. We have to do that because of TV and microphones, so people can hear what is being said, and folks can watch it later. So if you don't mind, come on down to the chair. It's not an interrogation, not the Spanish Inquisition, but we'd like to hear questions, comments. And if you want to mull it over and think about it and send in comments later or come to future meetings, by all means, this is not the one and only opportunity to comment on this. There will be many, many opportunities to do so. Good evening, Mr. Roll.
Good evening, Mayor. I'm privileged to be here tonight. I've been to many of the discussions that you referred to back in February, March, so I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. And a little hindsight, I remember when they put up Village Greens here, if I'm saying it properly, the development on Burlington, west or east of Main Street, going over to now the big apartment complex. The village went into real estate development at that time. I think some of you were not on the council at the time. I think Dave Fieldman was just coming in as assistant village manager and so forth. But the village and a taxpayer went into the real estate business. We bought Johnson Printers at a premium price. We bought the building on the corner of Main and Burlington at a premium price. And we got this developer, I can't remember their name, but the village handed it to them at a very reasonable price. And with the supposition that they're going to build all these stores and so forth. And hindsight and history tells me that, as you alluded to, the market for these apartments and condominiums went flat. And it was a long time that the village had a projected revenue source of 18% on the money that the village put forward for the subsidization of this development. And as you know, we've compromised in lots of businesses and so forth just to get businesses in that corridor. So the village at that time went into the real estate business. We owned a lot of property downtown. And we sort of gave it away to developers. Taxpayers subsidized the developer on the supposition we're going to make all this revenue. This plan 4 here sort of just brings back these memories to my knowledge. We're taking a piece of property there that doesn't have any commercial property value to a developer because he has to fix it before he can use it. And to get the taxpayer as his partner, is a sweetheart deal for a developer. He wants to be partners with the village of Downers Grove. And I would go for that kind of deal too. I'd go into partnership with a taxpayer because the taxpayer has, can sell bonds and everything
No,
else.
that's kind of not what happened in here, though.
Well, but you're speculating, you're gonna have to buy, you're gonna have to buy this property from Aldi's and so forth and so on, and put all this other stuff.
I don't,
You're in the real estate business, is what I'm saying.
The TIF funds have been available to do environmental cleanup for
Yeah,
the
but you're-
life, since the TIF.
You're
was
going
created.
back into the, how'd you call it, the real estate business. This is a government agency, we're not real estate brokers and developers and so forth. It's a fine point, but the other point I wanted to make to you is Commissioner mentioned it earlier, that the need for infrastructure is changing as we speak. When I first saw a computer, it was a big thing like this. Now Apple's going to be able to do all your stuff like this on your phone.
Dick Tracy, some things never change.
That's right, and it's right there. Police department may just talk. They won't have to have this unit in there, take the passenger seat up. They may just talk into their phone on their wrist, and all this good stuff. And same thing with the standardization and consolidation. In tonight's agenda, it was the fact that we're combining resources with the park district and this agency and that. And so this is coming. And so when you build a new building, it's anticipation you're going to have this need and greater needs, but it may not be true. So that's the other point. And the third point I wanted to make, I don't want to speak all night, but it's in 2011, the council at the time, under the leadership of Mayor Sandak, put forward a referendum on the ballot regarding term limits. And of course, term limits, it doesn't have a financial impact, but it does because it can sort of change the composure of the council. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to go to four different proposals here, you come down to proposal 4. I think it would be purposeful to go to the taxpayer to a referendum, say this is what we're going to do, and get the majority of the people, give them the chance to speak, because people like me, I'm only a handful, and these people in this room are representative of the community, but they're still a handful. And when we go have a general election, sometimes you have a possibility of 30 or 40,000 voters. You might get 5,000 or 6,000. So that's all I want to bring to your attention. And I thank you for listening to my comments.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Evening.
Hi, I'm Mike Hahn.
Welcome.
If I was going to plan a community, why not put the village hall in the center of town? Why not put the library in the center of town and the post office in the center of town? How many towns across the whole United States have a village square? It's in the center of town. If I lived on the south side of town, I don't want to go all the way up there. That's absurd.
I'm not following you. What's absurd? Putting a village hall in the middle of downtown?
No, putting it all the way up there.
Village
If
hall's
you-
not moving.
Well, the police department or whatever it is.
Police department, not village hall. Okay, I wasn't sure what you were
Okay.
saying.
Why move this? Why move this? What's wrong with this building? I don't see anything wrong with it. Maybe the police department needs a little bit of an expansion, but you're throwing gasoline on a fire. I see 4 is absurd. 3 is almost as absurd. 2, I could work with.
But it
It's
could be more
$27
money.
million.
Could be more money than option 4.
Well, then stick with 1.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn. Evening.
My name is
Evening, Anthony Shane. I just had a few questions, really. Don't have as an impassioned diatribe as the previous speaker.
Just real quick, your name?
Anthony Chang. So, some of the questions I have is, if we go with option one, how long will the maintenance of that site, how long will it extend the life? The other thing is, why does option one not take into account the drug seizures as a revenue source? Another question I have is, what is the current occupancy rate of multifamily residences in the downtown area with those that exist? How long do they take to get there? And what was initially projected for those to get filled? The next question I have is, what would be the recurring operational costs for each option after the work has been completed? Is there a published market analysis for option number 4?
No, not yet.
Okay.
35,000 feet.
Okay.
Nowhere near that.
Maybe if we get to 30,000.
But if I can just interrupt you for a second, this is good because one of the things that we've talked about doing is coming up with FAQs, frequently asked questions. And some of them, obviously, the published market for something hasn't even been designed yet, we can't do that. But if we continue to fly on this route, this is very helpful because I imagine other people will ask similar questions. So it's a good thing everything's being recorded that you're saying, because all this will help go into FAQs if we get there, so that others that have similar questions can benefit from your having asked them tonight.
Okay. What is the break-even point for option 4 from the property tax perspective? How long will it take to acquire that break-even point? And what is the likelihood of us reaching that point? What is the impact if we don't reach those targets? What kind of negative penalties will we have if it takes us 3, 4, 5, 10 years to reach those break-even points? Is option 1 consider converting part of the village hall to meet the space needs of the police department? Another comment is, if TIF is for blight removal in order to spur on private investment, why are we spending tax dollars for TIF to spend on a public building that in itself does not generate revenue? So there's some questions I have, and I'm not, I guess, at the volume of questions, I don't expect an answer at this immediate point in time, obviously, but something that I'm very curious about.
All good questions.
And if you have any of those answers already, that's great. If not, maybe we'll post them online and go on an FAQ.
And a number of the questions you asked would be best asked and answered at different points along the journey. So depending on where this goes, when we get to those points, we'll be able to answer them. Clearly, some of them, they're all good questions, but clearly some of them not able to answer now until we actually explore it further, which is what I think I'm hearing most people are interested in doing.
I think we can, though, answer the TIF question, right? And what those dollars would be used for, at least in a broad stroke. And we're talking about acquisition, environmental cleanup, other infrastructure needs that would be used, whether it was a completely private development or if it was a public development, such as a police department and things like that. It's important to clarify that for everyone.
Correct.
Correct. The yes.
But if we're using, if it was a private development, we wouldn't have to use TIF funds for property acquisition because somebody else would be acquiring the property. But the environmental cleanup would certainly still be there.
And that's a substantial cost.
It is. But not 8 million.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Laura Hoyce. I've been a resident of Downers Grove for 29 years, and I really value this community, and I value and agree with the opinions of Commissioner Olson. Option 1 is most desirable to me for many reasons. I know I've talked with people door to door for a long time, and I hear people telling me about how they need to move away because their taxes are getting too high and they don't know how they can stay in their home. These are particularly fixed income seniors that I'm thinking of, but there are many of them in our community. And I hear them as they speak to me, and I'm thinking of them tonight as I see these plans. I also think about what I've observed over the last several years, and I think the first gentleman who spoke had some very good points about how it evolved in Downers Grove, where we grew, and real estate developments, big real estate developments went in very quickly, and they were expensive, and I think the taxpayer gave up a lot. I think we did give up a lot to developers. And I see on the east side of Warren Avenue, a residential high-rise that never got off the ground. It's still there. I think of the three-story building next to the parking garage in Downers Grove, which is for retail use and has taken many, many years to fill the spaces. I think some of them may still be vacant, but I'm a member of the chamber, and I spoke with the owner of that building many times, and it just took years to get retail users in there. And I think that the village desires to have the revenue from the retail users, but how long did we wait for that? And how much is there really a need to take this highest and best, this land? Now, another thing I value as a resident is having the police station in the heart of town. I think that's where it should be. And I think if it's a valuable piece of property, we ought to keep it a valuable piece of property for its current use. The police station is small. It does need to be bigger. It does need to be renovated and improved to meet the needs of those that work there, of the people that are served by it, of the community as a whole. But, you know, I look at this building and I think about what happened to our library. The Downers Grove Library was a beautiful place before it was renovated. It didn't need to be renovated. Nobody asked me if it needed to be renovated.
The library has its own board.
Yes, but it's an example. It's an example, and my point is,
Check the library law.
this village hall is a nice building, and I don't see the need to tear it down and start over again. I think the taxpayers deserve to be heard on this. I think the taxpayers are taxed to the hilt already, and I think we ought to step back and say, well, perhaps Commissioner Olson is right.
Let me ask you, thank you, Laura, I appreciate your comments, but let me ask you a question. Hypothetically speaking, if option 1 and 4 had the same impact on the taxpayer, which one would you guide?
1. Because I don't think 14 is going to go to 13.
I think, ask you a hypothetical.
But you know, I'm
You gotta
relating
go
to something, but I think 14 is going to go higher than that, and I think that, you know, it's all well and good to talk about existing revenue, but I think that the taxpayers will be impacted by this quite a bit, and I think that they're not ready for it. I'm the town clerk of the Downers Grove Township, and in that role as record keeper, I see all of the assessment appeals coming across my desk, those that are for applications to change the assessment for a particular piece of property more than $100,000 in value. So whether that property is commercial or residential, there are many of them. I think we're getting a record numbers of assessment appeals. Well, what does that mean? Of course that means that people are, you know, they're saying the value of my property has gone down, I'm paying too high in taxes, the improvement isn't worth what it used to be based on comparable sales.
Right.
So let's look at that. Let's just not look at the current interest rate and say, we got to do this now because interest rates are low. I respectfully disagree with that because the government is printing money at such a fast rate, and we're borrowing money potentially on a foundation that's not sound. And that concerns me. And that's a larger view.
Sure.
That's a national view.
Yeah,
but
that's a generalization.
That is a generalization, but I
That's a fair
don't buy into
characterization of Downers
the
Grove.
interest rates are low, we ought to do this for this reason. I think we ought to listen to the taxpayer, and I'm talking listen to the taxpayer and what they're telling those folks like me that are on the ground, talking to the people. I love the plane analogy, and it works for me, and I understand what you're saying. I'm just not seeing it from that view. I'm seeing it from the ground.
No, we're on the ground with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And I'll talk to you about my assessment a little bit later.
Mr. Mayor?
How are you?
Hi, how are you, sir? I'd like to expound a little bit on what Laura just indicated, that increasing the taxes on the elderly senior citizens is a hard concept. But it's also burdensome on young families who are struggling financially. And I want to echo the sentiments expressed by Honorable Commissioner David Olson. I ran for commissioner of this village in 2009. I knocked on many doors in this village. And there was this move afoot within the village to build a brand-new police station and village hall. And over 95% of the people that I encountered in my door-knocking activities were totally against that concept. They did not want a brand-new village hall. They did not want a brand-new police station. And I would estimate I encountered a few hundred people. And to provide a percentage of over 95% of the folks being totally against that concept is astonishing. So I would like for you to take that in consideration before voting to expend village funds for the brand-new erection of a police station and village hall. And I want to make this very succinct, so I guess I'll end it right here.
Thank you. We're obviously taking everyone's views into consideration. It's why we're holding this and many other meetings and providing lots of opportunities, including some brand-new ones, specifically on this issue, so we can get as much input as possible, because obviously it is a community decision. Good evening.
Good evening. I don't know where to start. My name's Laurel Bowen. I was really disappointed in this presentation tonight. I know you folks have been talking about it for a long time, and I've taken the tour of the village hall when we had it years ago, and the the police department. And I just wonder, you're a banker, so you want the money to be lent to the village for the interest, and I don't see any realtors that are here, and we're not in the real estate business. The building that's across from the Tivoli, we practically gave that property away to that property, and that was supposed to be high-end retail, and look at all the lawsuits that came out of that. We have an insurance company there, that's not sales tax income. The building that went in Burlington at 945, which is what was discussed by Bill Roble, that is an exercise studio there. That's not a lot of sales tax income. They built it with wood. They've already replaced some of the balconies there, and that's a pretty high price place. We've got a lot of empty property. Are we playing Monopoly here? Because there's lots of empty properties we could fill if that's what the focus is on. The empty lot on Ogden, that we want to find something to go there instead of trying to sell it to a private owner, and we want to fill it in with something instead of trying to find a way to make this village hall work. Michael, you didn't explain what the organizational and how did you word it? Functional and organizational issues. You never divulged what those things were that makes this village hall inappropriate for us to use any further. What kind of things can't we use this village hall for anymore?
I'm not sure what.
I took those words down. You told me that this village was no longer workable because of functional and organizational issues.
I think that was directed towards the police department.
I don't know what that means.
I think you gave it.
Well, it's just two words. It doesn't, if you give us some information so we understand what that means.
We can elaborate on that.
Well, this is the first meeting you've had with the public?
No, there's actually a great deal of information on the website.
Well, not everybody's on the website.
I understand that. We try to make it.
And if you want us to be on TV now, not everybody's got cable either. And sometimes some of us want to see things and discuss it and get responses. If you're looking at $22 million, which is the low side, because I remember the parking deck, we were told $9 million, that ended up being over 20. So we can't guarantee that this is what, these are a lot of red lines here. And there's many residents in the village that are taxpayers. We've been taxed enough already. And we can't accept the reasoning that, well, the police station's too small because there's too many people arrested in the middle of the night. or we don't have any place to talk, there's little rooms over there that you can talk with the police officers, or you can talk with them in your house or out in the street by the car. And there's...
Oh, and I was referring to when there's multiple people who are arrested in the booking room and private information like social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers are divulged, and there's a prisoner sitting here and a prisoner sitting here. Would you like to share your information with another person?
Well, that's up to
under
them to organize that
That's the setup
problem
we
over
have.
there.
It's an operational efficiency.
So therefore, we need to build a new police department.
It's
No, I think
one
your-
of many examples
I think
of
your
why that
question
building
was,
isn't used.
what was an example of an operational issue? That's just one.
Which I think goes to one earlier.
The reasons don't seem to lead to spending at least $22 million to build new buildings on another site, and then we're dealing with environmental cleanup because we had Public Works Department here, now Public Works is way over there, and where's Firehouse 1?
Ellsworth Industrial Park.
So now we're going to move we're going to build another firehouse. Wow, another trophy. So what happens when those don't work? Then we're going to come along 15 years and decide those aren't working, we got to build them somewhere else. Why can't we figure out a way? Every time I'm here in this village hall, a police officer walks through the front door and walks out, another one walks out. They're always over here. So why can't we make use of the space that's too much over here for the policemen that don't have enough space over there? Just a thought. And we've got all this area here that Public Works used to use. So why can't we use that for some of the storage space that the police department needs for all their fine items that they've confiscated? So buy a storage locker and put it in. I thought you said we don't have enough storage space for confiscated items or stolen goods or whatever the heck we're putting on the website because we no longer have auctions to sell the things that aren't claimed. The red lines, I don't trust what you guys are doing, and we've got stormwater up on Ogden Avenue, we've got stormwater in the police department basement. We don't have storm sewers or water up on Ogden, do we? If we put it up there? So we're going to have to put a whole new infrastructure So I don't think these numbers are right, and I don't trust it. And I think we need to go to referendum if you're going to do any of these big capital projects, because you really need to provide the public that are going to be funding all this with the information they need to make the decision, because this is not just up to 7 people to decide these huge, big building projects. And I'm sure, can we guarantee it will be built with non-union labor? Because it's a government project.
Thank you for your comments, Laurel. Other questions, comments, please? Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity to talk. My name's Andrew Peloso. I live at 4938 Stanley. I'm a newish resident to the village, moved here with my wife in 2011, so I very much appreciate the opportunity to be able to participate in the process and meet folks who have been here for a long time and have such strong institutional knowledge about the village. I'll start off by saying, first and foremost, that I appreciate the fact that the village is taking time to work through a lot of really complicated issues, looking at issues of infrastructure, looking at issues of consolidation, of managing taxpayer dollars. I'm not going to make any statements at this point as to whether any of these proposals are good, bad, whatever. There's clearly a lot of information that is needed, and I think a lot of the other folks that have talked today have drilled into some of those points, because it is a very complicated issue, and you guys sitting on this side of the table have access to more information. You understand some of the organizational and the operational issues and the challenges that are associated with not only these buildings, but the infrastructure and the support that these buildings are providing to the community. There are a lot of challenges and issues about what is the community going to look like if you do one option versus another. I definitely have a level of cynicism myself about, this area has a high value for redevelopment and real estate. I live right across from that development that was just recently rezoned on Rogers. Not a teaspoonful of dirt has been moved on that site. And I'm paying a lot of taxes. I'm coming from a community where I didn't pay a lot of taxes, and I'm paying a lot right now. And so I worry about stuff like that. And I worry where some of these things sound really good right now, and we're going to take chances. We're going to take chances too by leaving buildings the way they are. We're going to take chances by moving buildings. So a lot of the decisions that this group is going to face and that the citizens are going to face of the village are, how do we do that? And I think one of the things that I really want to ask for is that we get as much of this information out as possible. And that there may have to be, and it may be a good idea to do public forums where there are folks who don't have access to the web or don't use that, so they can understand what some of these issues really are. Because I really feel like I'm semi-informed and I don't totally understand all of those things. One of the things that came up tonight are the environmental challenges on the Ogden and Lacey site. I'd like to know a lot more about that. That's the business that I'm in. I'm in environmental consulting, and when you guys said that, my little $ thing went right up, because environmental challenges, well, what are they? It's a groundwater contamination. I'm guessing that site has got stormwater issues. The topography of that site is going to be challenging. There's going to be a lot of cut and fill associated with that.
It's got wetlands on it, too.
It's got wetlands, which means there's going to be restrictions and constrictions on the site in your ability to be able to use it.
One of the reasons why it hasn't been developed.
Right. So I think that all of us, it would be useful for all of us to know what you know right now and how that's going to potentially affect your ability to be able to do those things.
To stop you there on that point, the status of that parcel is well known. I won't pull a report out right now, but that information we do have.
Okay, that would be good as you guys
It's
are
pretty well quantified, because there have been multiple attempts to redevelop that parcel, and that information had to be delved into as part of that process.
That information now has a shelf life on it too, though.
Agreed. You just took the words out of my mouth. It may need to be updated. But
It may need to be updated, there may be additional costs. Things move around, so.
yes, they do. It's amazing what you find in the ground once you start digging a hole.
Yeah, and that right off the bat kind of concerns me and scares me a little bit as you guys are analyzing and looking at costs. And so every day that you do all these things, costs change. The cost of money, the cost of doing things on the site, the cost of renovating this building. I mean, I've been sitting here and listening to a lot of commentary, and it's good commentary. But I can see water leaks, I can see issues that are in this building, and I know the challenges that are going to be associated with it. So my simple statement on this is that whatever information the village has that's available right now to characterize that site, put that out. Whatever information you guys are looking at to quantify, to understand, renovate these buildings, go to another site, put that information out as well. And I am 100% in support of, ultimately, this should come to a voter referendum. That let an informed populace of the village make that final decision, because we will be the ones who will bear the financial responsibilities and the logistic responsibilities associated with it for now, and hopefully for me, when I have, a couple of decades worth of time on my residency card. And I apologize that I did not dress appropriately for the occasion. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. You were complaining it wasn't a Superman shirt. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tom McCrenn, 545 Chicago Avenue. I remember the last meeting we had on this, and what we did to staff was, we had 4 options, and you guys told them to further expand on 3 and 4. 1 and 2 were ignored. What are you going to recommend this evening that staff do moving forward?
Flies down to a level of greater detail on number 4 is what I'm hearing from most people. In other words, get some more information to be able to answer some of the questions that are coming out, both from the council as well as from residents, in terms of what would 4 actually look
So the
like.
4 is the one you're going forward with?
Well, we want them, I think that's the one that probably requires the most analysis. That's the hardest one. That's the one that requires the most creativity. It's the most innovative one. It's the one that is, it's like electricity. Until you understand it, it's pretty scary. But once you understand it, you know what? It's a pretty useful thing. I think it's a question of what the direction would be, is to further explore that option, try to find out what the dollars really mean, look at the revenue sources, look at some more of the, take it further so we can have a more informed, to the last gentleman's comment, discussion about what all that actually means and what the benefits really are, with a little bit more certainty. There's no certainty in anything, but with more certainty.
You're assuming that there'd be benefit. What if they come back with 4 and more detail and you don't like it? Now what do we do?
We don't like it.
So then we go back to 3, or we say, okay, let's go to the drawing board and do this all over again? Or
If we have to.
just so, yeah. And I have one quick question for Mike. Did the estimated costs change from last meeting to this? I went looking for my thing from last meeting and I couldn't find it.
I'd have to look to see exactly, but I think generally the cost estimates have remained relatively similar.
Relatively the same,
Yeah,
even though we have
it's
more detail.
different in that the presentation is different in that it's broken out into phases here because
Yeah,
really
we
it
didn't have
is.
phases with the last time.
Yeah, so we've tried to simplify it in some respects because to show that each phase does operate somewhat independently.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Get a nice long list of FAQs. Other questions or comments at this point in time? If everyone want to take a breather, I'll open it up for any other questions or comments from the council. People think of other things they want to ask in the meantime. Again, we're nowhere near the airport, folks, so there's plenty of opportunities for questions or comments on this topic. David?
Mayor, I just want to say, first I want to say thank you to all the residents who are both here to get better informed on the topic and those that spoke and shared their thoughts or questions or concerns. I think that's very important, and I'm pleased to see that the outreach that the village did to encourage residents to attend seems to have worked. And I know myself and some of my colleagues did outreach to our respective communities and neighbors, encourage them to attend as well. And I'm pleased to see that a number of people did take us up on that. So thank you to all of you. Wanted to comment on a couple of things that were mentioned over the past, however long we've been taking some public comment. First was that I wanted to discuss slightly was this the idea of the Ogden Avenue TIF fund usage. From the very beginning of this, I've been concerned about the idea of using TIF funds for things like land acquisition, especially land acquisition for public buildings. I personally believe that TIF is best directed for specific commercial development that is going to increase sales tax. I mean, TIF money effectively is money that's not going to our schools, money that's not going to the other governmental bodies. And I know that, for example, District 99 has a facility within this TIF, and would certainly have liked to gather money from this TIF if they could have to improve their facility that's located in this TIF. But I'm certain that they would have liked that opportunity, but out of respect, and I don't know if they communicated that directly or if they came to the village and asked specifically, but TIF money is used for commercial, and I think it should be exclusively designated for commercial use. So I'm concerned about using the fund balance of the TIF as part of the funding source of option 4 in this project. So that's one of my concerns. It continues to remain. Second thing I just wanted to comment on was the discussion of the previous plans for village halls and police station. I think there was a 2007 plan that was created, and there was a lot of work done at that time that was then put on hold because of the recession and the tough economic climate. There's been some comments here that throughout that time we sort of right-sized the organization, and I agree with those comments. I think that the reduction in staff and to a more lean and productive staff and the excellent work that they have done, and our leadership team and our individual village staff is really remarkable. But what I'm reminded of, and thinking back to the last long-range planning meeting, I know there's been suggestions by at least some on this council that perhaps we should increase staff, or perhaps we should be able to do more projects. And perhaps that will require more people. Maybe not next year, but 10 years down the line. And so the idea to me that I'm immediately seeing that is somewhat concerning is there's been some discussion that, oh, well, we need to right-size this village hall and decrease the size of it and become smaller. Well, in the 2007 plan, we said we actually needed to make a bigger village hall. 2007 to 2014 is not that long of a time. And so in 2020...
iPhones weren't around then.
That's true. Very true. iPhones weren't around. It's not that long of a time, but there's been a lot of technological change. And so in the period, in the next to 2021, I think there's a possibility of a lot of change perhaps in the needs of the community, perhaps the technology, those things. So to me, the idea that we need something new right now is something that concerns me. And from a personal perspective, the first project I ever took on at my job, back when I was an intern, was moving our facility from Naperville or Warrenville to Chicago. We moved our offices, and it was a major project. And a brand new, beautiful office that we have in Chicago. And the funny thing about it is, we've only been there 4 years, but the challenges for that facility and things that have changed are already significant. We don't have enough meeting space. We didn't think that so much business could be conducted without using a desk, without using, more in a conference room rather than individually. So, the ways we've worked has changed, and that's only over 4 years. So, from my perspective, I think that all that says to me that continuing to utilize the resources and facilities and the assets that we have currently speaks to me, given those experiences. Final point I wanted to address is the point of referendum. I think that some said, oh, well, you can't do this without referendum. Well, technically, under home rule powers and the various parts, this village council can. It can do. The question is whether it should undertake a project of this magnitude without engaging the community fully in a referendum process. I don't know what that process would look like. It's really these discussions tonight have really got me thinking about that, but it's something that I'd be interested in. I think that hearing the electorate and hearing the residents of this community speak is something that I value a great deal, and I know that I can have I can have a lot of conversations with neighbors and friends and try to inform them, but that's only going to reach a small segment, and each of us can only reach a small segment. I think that a magnitude of a project like this, that's something that we should think about and consider. It's not something that I had previously discussed in other comments, so I did want to raise that before we concluded. So, just some additional comments and thoughts that came to mind during the public comment. And again, thanks to all the residents that are here, both to share their views and to get more informed on this project. It's I know it takes a lot to spend 2.5 hours on Tuesday night.
David, where's your threshold for governing by referendum? Is there a price tag? Is it 10 million? Is it 14, 18, 0, 4? We often make decisions at this village council in the $1 million mark.
Come on up here.
Almost weekly. Our roadway infrastructure plan, our sidewalk plan, over time, they all add up to big numbers. My perspective on referendum is there are some important aspects of government that can be used as a referendum, but in this case, we were all elected to be here tonight. Our door is always open, our phones are always on, our email is always there. I don't know, I tried to count, I think this is maybe the third or fourth actual meeting on this topic alone, let alone all the long-range financial planning meetings, the budget meetings, the meetings in 2007 till today. And yeah, the world has changed between 2007 and 2014. I'd like to think that this organization, I don't like to think, I know this organization has changed and adapted to a recession. It's adapted to different calls for service. And I do know that this staff and the people that we have here on the professional staff will right-size the new Village Hall. Is it by 1 or 2 more people up or down? Yeah, it will be built the right way. We have so many other municipalities, buildings, office buildings to look at to make sure that we have what we want as an organization going forward. This concept of governing by referendum comes up every now and again, and I think it's the will of the people and it's their right. However, my perspective is if we start governing on decisions of $10 million, what's going to be next? You know, we passed the stormwater bond, a couple of them around that one number, if not more. And it's important to me to know that we have the trust of the residents when we were elected. We have terms of 4 years. We now have term limits. That's, in my opinion, how we are get the shakeout from our residents. And it's important to be able to make decisions, big decisions, at this council level because we do have the authority to do it. And we are having public meetings. We are discussing this with folks. We had some great questions tonight. We will follow up and get that information out. That's the way we do it in Downers Grove. We easily could have had a couple of executive session meetings. We could have had a couple of other regular council workshop meetings. Okay, go option 4, do it. Come back in a couple of months. Here's the plan. Yay or nay? And if 4 people say yes, not all 7, 4, we're done. And we're building new stuff, we're moving properties, we're selling parcels, and everything's happening. That's not how we operate in Village Downers Grove. We ask, we get information, not only as a council, we share. We bring people to our Village Hall to listen. We let people speak. That's their right, that's what we have to do. We do it probably the best of any municipality in Illinois, maybe even the country. This is the process. I don't feel like governing by referendum is the process to make this decision.
To respond to your question about threshold, first I want to say that I do agree that the process that we're engaging in is a good one. The engagement of our residents throughout these meetings and through websites, through our social media efforts, and through the videos that our staff very creatively put together. I think these are all excellent ways that we're bringing residents into this conversation, and that I certainly appreciate and agree. In regard to your original question about at what level do you put something to referendum? In my opinion, I don't think there's a specific level. I don't think that necessarily saying, oh, well, if we're going to spend $10 million or more, we have to go to a referendum. I don't think that's the way to govern. I think that, to me, a scale project of this magnitude that is significantly changing our community and significantly changing where and how we might provide services, I think that's something that voters should have a chance to speak on. I think that this process is excellent. Whether that perhaps maybe an advisory referendum and it's just another piece of data and another way that we engage people. Because we can do all the social media that we'd like, and we can talk, I can send out an email or I can make a phone call to 50 people. But getting it in front of residents through the referendum process, I think it adds a level of seriousness, adds a level of engagement that we might not otherwise see through this process. And so I think that given the scale and magnitude of the decisions that we're talking about, I think that that is an appropriate way to engage the public. I mean, to me, so it's not about the threshold, the number necessarily, it's more about the scale. And to me, what I'm not advocating for necessarily is some binding referendum that, oh, well, if we put forward this, if it passes, we're going to go forward, and if it fails, we're not going to go forward. But using that as a way to engage residents and to really hear from them directly.
Well, that's actually the problem I have. Let's not go too far off of the topic here in getting governing philosophy, but once you start going to referendum, you actually minimize your ability to engage the public. Because if I remember correctly, certain referendums, you can't then, as the body, get involved in promoting information. people. We have, I think, much more flexibility and ability to engage residents like the way we are now than we would be under that situation. So if the goal of a referendum is to educate people, it's a poor substitute for what we're doing now.
But I think, I just.
If the goal, well, no, it's not my opinion, I think it's the law of Illinois. And I
Because
would-
then
I
the
would
village
encourage-
couldn't put out
then-
information.
then the village can't put out information about it.
So if the village were to ask an advisory question to its residents,
As the body with the referendum, but just trust me, we don't need to get into it now, we're getting way off topic. But I would encourage you, if your goal, and what I'm hearing you say, is that the purpose of the referendum is to be more of a proponent of information, that I would encourage you to check Illinois law on that, because I don't think that's correct.
given.
We can do a lot
Wait,
more.
certainly.
Right now with social media and email and meetings and discussions, and we can sit down here with folks right here and have a conversation with them. I don't think I have to check my notes on this, but I don't think we can do that.
So, regardless
But
of whether,
that's
regardless
besides the
of,
point.
from my perspective, regardless of whether we can or can't do that during the time of that referendum question, I think that having that information from the residents, directly from the residents, is valuable.
Well, I agree, except wouldn't you want to have informed input rather
Yes.
than uninformed input?
And I think that if we were to have.
Right now, we're getting informed input.
If we were to have a referendum question, given what is already out
Yeah,
there.
what are you going to put in? Well, you couldn't possibly write a question that would describe the kind of things we've just heard people ask us tonight.
I certainly agree. And so, but distilling it and allowing people to feel more engaged in the process, I think is valuable.
Well, I understand that. People have differences of opinion on that topic. I recognize that. We've heard that before, and we'll hear it again and again. My point is simply, if the purpose of it is more information rather than less, I think we might want to reanalyze that, because I'm not sure that's going to get where you want to go. If that's really the purpose, which is more education, more interaction, more engagement with the community, I don't think that's where you want to go. And it's not my opinion. It's not my opinion.
But I disagree fundamentally that I think that a referendum question engages the community in ways that these meetings do not. And it not necessarily engaging, but engages residents to talk to one another, to communicate.
Well, but you gotta be able to give them the information about the subject. I've heard people.
The information is out there.
Actually,
We can't deliver that
It's
information.
not what I'm hearing.
So if we were to have, this is,
Why don't we put that on the frequently
Yeah.
asked question list, and we'll get more information.
right, it'd be good to get more information, but
I
to me.
wouldn't want to limit our ability to provide information to people, that's all I'm saying. I don't think anybody here wants to limit the information that goes to the residents. In fact, there
Certainly
was a
not.
gentleman that spoke very eloquently about putting more information out there.
Correct.
And in a context where people can understand its meaning and its purpose. No different than any of us do. We don't just want raw information, we want to understand its context, its purpose. I heard 3 people sitting here tonight asking that very question. Tell me what this means, tell me what, yeah, I want to be able to do that. And then ultimately, we'll all as a community decide what we want to do. And it might be, who knows what it's going to be yet. But I think we're all very much embracing the goal of being able to engage as much as possible, provide as much information, and anything that would limit that, I think we ought to be very careful about pursuing.
And I think that multiple processes allow feedback from different sources in different ways.
But I'm just, I don't recall specifically, I'm just pointing something out, be careful what you ask for, you might actually achieve the opposite result of what I hear you calling for very passionately.
Right. I mean, and I'm not saying that the residents will or will not agree with my opinion, or what I'm saying, or what I've been hearing from, let's be clear.
That's what I'm getting at.
I'd like to
You
hear
know what, I talk to people that say we should do many things that we just cannot do. So you're hearing people that saying you don't do it. I mean, we can sit here all day. I mean, today we had a room full of people that have said, you know what, let's not do this, we should look at number 1, or we shouldn't do anything. Maybe next week, or when we have a coffee, we'll have people over saying, you know what, I watched you on TV, I read about you in the paper, I saw you on a blog, or however people communicate or receive information. Could be the complete opposite of what today's room was. So I think I agree with the mayor here that we need to be cautious on how we act so we don't penalize the resident so they cannot then get the information. Because you're absolutely right, this is a huge, huge project. And it's going to redesign our village. Those are all true facts. I just caution you that we don't start penalizing without really knowing we're doing it to ourselves. And I don't mean us seven, I mean the whole community.
Again, I just raise it as something to, as an FAQ. I want to go back and remind myself as to my recollection of what those restrictions are. That's all. I just raise it as a point of follow-up.
Absolutely. Happy to, I think that'd be a good thing to do.
I do have a question though, Mayor.
Sure.
We received an email from a resident today that brought up some really good questions and per your definition of what we're talking about with our, how many feet off the ground we are. I just want to make sure that the emails we're receiving won't get lost in transition and that some of those questions can become part of the FAQs. And one of them was, we talk about
Absolutely.
Manpower, how we operate, so on and so forth.
Right. I think what's going to happen is we're going to hear a lot of questions, a lot of very good questions from people who have opinions all over the spectrum on this topic, and I think most of them are going to be of the mind, well, I want to hear more, I want more information, not less. I want to be able to, we get pretty darn good residents in this community. They're pretty engaged, they're pretty smart, and they ask good questions, and they insist upon good answers. But I think we're going to hear a lot of questions, and we've already heard a number of questions. We've heard more tonight, and we're going to hear more still, that we're going to start to be able to put into buckets of similar types. And I think as we collect those, we can start then putting together information that addresses questions of that nature. So that way when somebody is looking for more information, they can already have the benefit of what their neighbors have asked, which are the same kind of questions I would expect most people to ask in a project of this nature. So we are assembling those, whether they come in electronically or whether they're in the checkout line at Caputo's or wherever it is. I made that mention on purpose.
Refresh time.
Yes, and I have to name them all. Lemon Tree, I think.
Lamborghini.
Jewel. I don't say Dominic's anymore. But so that wherever we are, however the occasion arises,
I just wanna make sure
website,
that-
meeting, grocery line, wherever it is, we can provide that information that folks want to know.
Okay.
I'm seeing lots of heads nodding as to that process, so
I agree.
now we're going to get an on-the-spot update.
I just,
Good evening.
Dave
Your name and address,
Fieldman on
please.
Cornell. Just to add some clarity, we talked about flight analogies and next steps, but it's important to understand how we would use this direction. We need this direction now because we're preparing the FY15 budget, which comes out in 2 weeks. And we have a plethora of information about a lot of options, and so the first thing we're going to do is get out more information about these options, which we've shared with you on many, many occasions. The second thing we're going to do is start to plug some real dollars into a budget so that the community and the council can react to, well, how much does this cost now? What's the total project budget? When does it happen? How does it happen? What does it mean for the FY15 budget? What money would be spent from what fund, et cetera. So we'll do those two very specific things, get the information out and prepare a budget. It's interesting that the next step is really a series of more decisions, not particularly more answers. It goes into a 9-meeting budget process where we get specific information and ask specific questions and get more specific direction. So that's how the flight analogy actually translates into the next 2 months. I just wanted to get that information out there. I think that would help understand all these people who have commented tonight. It's very much appreciated, and then there's a series of meetings to comment very specifically on exact dollars and funds and what those things buy us and how it moves the project along.
Appreciate that clarification as always.
Thanks.
Mayor, since we really want more input from the residents, is there any way with our next coffee with council that we could earmark it specifically for extension of this meeting for those that weren't able to be here tonight or chose not to be here, that give another opportunity at the next coffee with the council?
Sure. I don't think we need to earmark it for it per se, but I think we can just, if we want to mention that a featured topic of conversation would be this discussion and what people think.
if we can do that. and-
I wouldn't want to exclude somebody from coming on.
Oh, no, my gosh, no, but a lot of times it's just come meet us, talk to us, we all have separate sidebar conversations, but if we can, like we do in October, when we do with the budget, we have a specific meeting, coffee with council, budget related.
Right.
I understand, based on Fieldman's comments, that this is gonna be part of the budget, but in continuation with what David's saying and many of the residents have said,
And I'm sure if we get further down this path, then like other major projects, we've actually had boards, pictures,
Correct.
information, at coffee with council, the people just walking by can see it and stop and ask questions. I don't think we're quite there yet.
No.
We need to get beyond tonight in order to do that, but absolutely.
thank you.
Before we get back to you, Laurel, anyone else who hasn't spoken already who would like to speak or ask a question before we go back to round two? All right, seeing no one. Laurel, please.
I forgot to mention this about the firehouse. We've already,
The new one proposed?
the proposed new firehouse number 1, which is in Ellsworth Park, you want to move that to Ogden Avenue. That's the proposal, correct? And if you don't move it to Ogden Avenue, you'll keep it there? But let me just make you remember that you've already closed the firehouse on the far northwest side on Finley Road. And you've already got a firehouse across from Good Samaritan Hospital, which handles the north side. So when you take away the firehouse that's over in Ellsworth Park, what firehouse, the new one, is going to go all the way down there and handle that one? The new one at Maple and Main, 55th and Main, that's going to handle Ellsworth Park then? Because that's an industrial park.
Right.
So there's industrial accidents, there's public works, they don't have a firehouse there. So you're taking all the firehouse coverage on that corner of our village and taking it away and putting it up where the one at Good Samaritan Hospital can handle. Are you short on fires? Are there a lot of fires up there that you need to handle, that you need to put another one up there?
No, that's a very good FAQ, and it goes directly to the point about improved response time, and so we'll have the information on that point to you, but the short answer is it's actually improved response time from that location, the proximity to the Belmont Underpass helps.
I'm still not clear on your answer.
The proposed location would actually result in improved response time.
To which area?
To
Northwest.
a broader area to serve more people.
So what happens to the Walnut area, where the Ellsworth Park is?
It's still served adequately, if not better, but again, without getting into the details on that, that's a...
Okay,
that'll
well
be
then
an
you could
FAQ.
always have the 100-year problem, where you have a lot of fires or some emergency that, it
God
just...
forbid there's 100-year fires.
And the other
Rain
thing,
is bad enough.
the other thing, I wanted to thank you because tonight's the first night that I got up at the podium and the microphone didn't fall off. So
That's
this
the
is,
one already on the table.
no, not this one, the podium. This is not a podium.
Sorry.
See, our whole thing is broken, we gotta fix it.
Okay.
You said.
Thank you, you're smart tonight. That's my whole
$10
point.
million microphone there.
That's my whole point. The maintenance. We've lived in our house for 26 years. Do you know the last time that road was paved was 27 years ago? And it took me that long for the podium to be fixed here in Village Hall. So, and the HVAC is perfect in here. It's actually too cold, so we could minimize the use of it. But that's my point. You're complaining about the maintenance problems here, and so we got to think about the cause of the problem is maybe we weren't concentrating on maintenance, and maybe we need to focus more on maintenance rather than building new things. Because if we keep building new things and don't concentrate on maintenance, we're still going to have the same problem 25 years from now. So maybe we need to focus on different areas.
Thank you. Commissioner Barnett's only been saying that to anyone who will listen for
I got to pedal home.
5 years now. Good night. Any other questions or comments? Any last words of wisdom from any members of the council?
Staff has adequate direction to move on and prepare the budget for 2015.
That's what I heard.
I'm
seeing
seeing
it
the
further.
partnership, Mayor, with 58. Do we need anything further with that?
I think staff also has direction to put together what's necessary in order to formally make those outreaches.
Disseminated far and wide.
Yes, well, specifically the 58, but obviously there are other opportunities
You clearly are interested in that as well.
Disseminated farming plan.
I'm not going to call you on your English at this hour. All right, then we haven't adjourned, so I do need a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Commissioner Burnett?